So on Monday's episode, I had the modern savvy CPA on. Uh, did you have a chance, Dominic, to listen to the conversation?
Absolutely. I listened to the whole thing, and I think you'd be proud of me. I had it on 1.75 speed, so I'm climbing up. I'm catching up to you, man. Catching up. No, I'm definitely not catching up. If you know anything about Chris, you know that his ears are you've never seen anything like it, right? Not from a
You
visual
never heard
perspective.
anything like it.
I've never heard anything like yeah, they're huge, man. They're like, no, I'm just kidding. If anything, I have the big ears. That's why I wear the headphones. But no, Chris listens to podcasts and informational things at like 4, 5, 6, 8 times speed, crazy speeds, right? And that could be my win of the week as I listen to the podcast on 1.75 times speed. And it's kind of funny because every time you spoke, it was like a squirrel, like on cocaine or something like that. Because it's like we already talk rather quickly, and then it's like, dude, you put 1.75 on, it's like, dude, this is getting crazy in here. But I highly recommend going back and listening to that podcast. Very interesting, very informational podcast. But we're going to be recapping it today and doing our 5 Friday feedback. As you know, that's on the back half of the podcast. But yeah, do you want to give me the rubdown? Give me the information. What did you take away from Monday's pod, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I took away is that the modern savvy CPA and I have a passion for trying to teach millennials and Gen Z about financial literacy. Because I think for both her and I, we grew up without that education at all. There's a lot of things that were passed down generationally from our families, from our parents who are, immigrants to this country, and, just kind of teaching, this is what we did in our country, so it must work here. But when you move to America, the situation is just very different than it was. And that's the reason that, my grandparents and her parents immigrated to America, is because the situation was different from where they came from. But if you keep the same thing that you were doing there, well, you're kind of repeating the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely, every time you want to transition to a new land, it's hoping that, it's better over there, right? One of the things you guys touched on that I wanted to go back, because it's been an ongoing dialogue here on the podcast, is this concept of enough. Understanding what is essential and what is enough. I know we've had a few guests on over the last couple of weeks, and the viewers will see coming up. This topic of enough has continued to just really been so prominent in our lives, because it's a question all of us really need to answer. And it's such a difficult question to answer if it does have an answer. But kind of, what was your take? What did you learn from her and how she kind of defined enough?
I think when I asked her that question, or it kind of came up, she talked about just feeling complacent or feeling okay with what is, rather than craving for more. She was just like, I just want to be financially well off. I want to have financial well-being. And, I think when you're trying to define what is enough, it's kind of ineffable. And I don't mean like it's not effable. Ineffable means it's like hard to describe. Yes. You can't put it into words. So that's actually the reason that next week I want you and I to have a philosophical discussion on what is enough, because this is my goal for 2025, is to figure that out. So maybe the reason this keeps coming up, this enough thing, is because it's me and like I'm trying to figure it out, and like I'm asking the guests and just kind of going there. But yeah, that concept of enough, I really want to explore that with you next week and kind of go very, very deep into it, because I don't know. I don't know if there's a right answer.
No, I don't know if there's a right answer either, but I think that'll make for a good podcast. A very philosophical, the philosophical guys, I guess, now. Transitioning, a little rebranding possibly. No rebranding. But absolutely, I think, finding what is enough for you it's almost like finding the finish line at the end of a marathon. I mean, that's the goal, right? We're trying to find the goal. We're trying to find where do I cross the finish line of the marathon. So, I mean, it makes sense to really know yourself and know what enough is. It might not be a number. It might be a feeling, but that feeling could be dangerous because feelings change and emotions are like a roller coaster. So, yeah, I mean, I highly encourage, as we lead up to that potential podcast, what does enough mean to you guys? What is enough for you? And that might be a more difficult question than you might have expected.
Yeah. And, the big thing that the modern savvy CPA and I talked about was what's coming up for the millennials and Gen Z, and all the, I guess, drawbacks or setbacks that our generation has with us. And the thing that I really wanted to make sure that if our listeners started to listen at the beginning, to please be sure to listen to the back half. Because at the beginning, like the first, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, 40 or 30 minutes, so it's a lot of laying out the problem. Like these are the problems. And if we just sit here and we ruminate on these are all the problems, these are all the problems, like, yeah, it's good to know what the problems are. And you have to figure out, okay, those are all the problems. Now what do I do about it? So if you've listened to Monday's podcast, be sure to listen to the whole thing, because at the end is when we actually start to talk about what you need to do to get out of it. Because as we laid out on Monday's pod, yes, there are a lot of things against millennials and Gen Z, and it's still our responsibility to go out and fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, nobody's coming to save you. So you can only save yourself. And hiding and running from the problems doesn't make the problems go away. You got to face these problems. But luckily, you don't have to face them alone. You know, you have a lot of educational resources and a lot of help from a lot of different areas, and us being one of them. And if you find value in that, we appreciate that, because that's what we're here for. And we want to share this message of financial independence. So if you could, I mean, share the podcast with your friends, with your family. If you're in a Discord server, drop it in the self-promotion, you know, anywhere you can. Because let's be honest, the world is a pretty nasty financial place right now, and everybody needs a leg up. And that's what we're here for. So she also talked about the importance of community in financial learning. And that's kind of segue on what I was just talking about. How do you find that? How do you feel about, like, how do you find community to be an important aspect of finance? I feel like it's not often talked about, and it's not often even thought about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that when people talk about finance, when they think about finance and they're looking for their guru or whoever's going to teach them, they're not looking at the personal side of personal finance. They're looking at the number side, and they're just looking for, like, okay, what investments do I need? What charts am I looking at? They want that information. But at the end of the day, even if you have all that information, but you don't have the thought process or the ability to implement it, we aren't machines. If I told you today, like, hey, I need you to go and risk all of your money of a 50-50 chance, heads or tails, 50-50 chance, and it's going to double or not. And let's say you win. Okay, great. Like, you're going to feel good about that. But if you lost, then that'd be really hard. And if I told you the next day, all right, let's go ahead, all the money you worked for yesterday, let's do it again. Let's run it back, 50-50 shot. We are not machines. Because for machines, it actually makes sense to do like 3 times leverage trades and just do that all the time. But when you have a 3 times leverage trade, you go up 3 times, but you also go down 3 times. And since we're human beings, our losses hurt substantially more than our gains do, because something can be mathematically correct, but if you don't have the ability to follow through with it due to your emotions, which we all have, it doesn't matter. So when I'm coming to this is when I'm talking about community. The community is that thing that's going to help you during the hard times. There's a reason that every podcast we say, bring one person along for the journey of financial independence to share the podcast. We're not just being self-serving. It's to have a larger community so that people that are listening have somebody to bounce ideas off, have somebody to say, like, hey, this is what's going on in my life, what's going on in your life, can start to see the common trends here. Because for me, when I was going through my journey of financial independence, and I would talk to my coworkers about it, they would think that I was crazy. They're like, why would you do that? Even my wife thought I was like crazy, like, why would you want to do that? Like, let's just spend the money. You don't know if you're going to live forever. We know that we have right now, so let's spend it all. And my brain will always go, yeah, and we could live for a long time, so why not try to do both? But I was very lucky in that I had my best friend and a roommate who was also pursuing his version of financial independence. He was more real estate focused, but we had a common community. Additionally, I would listen to podcasts like a psychopath and just listen to anybody who was talking about financial independence, listening to Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, as many audiobooks as I possibly could. And I had to create a fake community of people that was only speaking to me one-sided. I didn't really have many people I could go and talk to like we have now, Dominic. So that's the reason that I want people to go out and have that community, because yes, listening to the podcast, having us talk to you is wonderful, but you also need to be able to talk to somebody else. My financial game has, since us starting the podcast, because now I'm not just talking about this stuff in my head, talking about it to my wife and my one friend, like I'm talking about it with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's so prevalent. I think a lot of people think that, oh, my community, it's like my best friend, my family, maybe my coworkers even, like you were saying. And that's kind of the community that you half chose and half just like, hey, you're born with these parents, you're born with these brothers, you know. But I love what you were saying that you're like, you kind of flip the script a little bit. And, you're like, what? My community isn't serving me in the ways that I need. I need a mentor who's above me, who's gone before me. And you built it, you built it with, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, with all these geniuses, right, in their field, these great guys, right? I love that. I love the idea of like, you might come from nothing, right? You might be in the slums of Chicago. You're like, dude, all I see is crime around me. It's like, yeah, but my community, what I hear and what I intake is all success. Like they say, you are the product of the top 5 people you hang around, right? But I wonder how much that extends to, well, all I listen to is, books from Ray Dalio, from Warren Buffett, from these financial guys. All I listen to is Jocko Willink, Leif Babbitt, David Goggins. This is my tribe, right? These are my 5 people. These are my 6 people. These are my community, right? So just because you come from an area that, you might not have that, person in your life where it's like, dude, I want to become that guy. And most of us don't, right? There's going to be people in our lives that, that they inspire us to be better, right? But they don't have everything. And why would they, right? Because that'd be pretty weird. You'd be like, dude, Chris, I want your life. Like, I gotta have a house, a 2-story house too. I gotta have, grass in my backyard too. It's like, I gotta do all this. I'm trying not to dox you too hard, but, I want to have perfect, it's like, no, it's, you create your own path based on everything you've accumulated. And that's what I love about this podcast too, is, we're getting Chris. Chris is such a great bang for your buck, right? He's so knowledgeable. He's so wise, right? But it's also, we're not just getting Chris. We're getting all the knowledge that he's accumulated through the podcast, through the books, through the mentorships, through the tried and true trials of life. That's what's beautiful about this podcast, right? We get to learn through someone else's eyes. We get to learn, and that's the best way to learn, because Chris and I both know this oh too well. The pain of learning, it's not always fun. It's not always fun. So if you can learn from someone else's pain, dude, that's like a superpower. It's like a superpower, honestly. And getting back to our guest, I can appreciate someone who spent, 27 years being a CPA, and that level of experience coming on our podcast and really speaking about what she's seeing. And what I got a lot from the podcast was, no, not enough people are planning ahead. Not enough people are developing a mindset, right? And she was really preaching that, you don't have to start with $1 million, but just start. Save a little bit here, a little bit there, take a little bit out of your paycheck here, invest it. Just get started. And I agree with that. And education is one of those things that she was also talking about that was holding a lot of people back. And really, we live in a time where, there's zero barrier to entry for learning, unless you're going to like a college. But I'm talking about real knowledge, right? Where the knowledge is, not the facilities that teach the knowledge. You know what I'm saying, Chris?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah, those are some of the things that kind of stuck out with me. She talked a little bit about mindset and how that is kind of needed in order to become financially successful. And you're preaching to the choir here. That's like our whole game, right? But how prevalent is mindset in financial independence and really flexing that finance muscle?
I don't think I exaggerate when I say that it is almost everything. That mindset is almost everything. Maybe it's 80 or 90% is going to be your mindset. Earlier, you were talking about education, and I agree. Financial literacy in this country is abysmal. Around the world, abysmal.
Fair, yeah.
And on the podcast, we talked a lot about that, and I kind of told her about my conspiracies of how I think that, the system, it's systematic to set us up to be consumers, to constantly, there's a reason that people see 5,000 ads a day, probably more with Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all that stuff. They're constantly being bombarded with, basically, we're going to go back to this concept of enough. Everything is saying like you in your current form is not enough. But if you had this one item, if you had these new shoes, this new clothes, this new lipstick, whatever, you would be perfect. And I think we can all think back to a time that we thought, if I got that new car, if I got that degree, if I got this, whatever, I would finally feel happy. And you got it and you're like, yes. And then it immediately went away, or went away within a few days, because it's that dopamine, that seeking molecule that we're constantly striving for. And the closer we get to it, the more dopamine, the more dopamine. And the moment you attain what you want, the dopamine stops, because the dopamine isn't the happy molecule. The dopamine is the seeking molecule. So exactly what you said there, Dominic, that yes, all of these things are true. Education is abysmal. It is hard to find true sources of information, because there's a lot of grifters out there of people saying, like, this is what I do. How many people are trying to sell their program for $2.99? And if you don't buy their program, like, you're out of their life. There's a reason they get so upset. It's because their program doesn't work. The way they make money is by selling their program. Because if their program works so well for their day trading or whatever, they wouldn't be selling their program, because if too many people learn their program, it's going to fail. That's how all algorithmic tradings work. They need to be against the grain. So why would you want to teach a bunch of people how to do it? That would cause your system to fail, unless you're just teaching the framework and then they have to figure out the specifics. All of that is true. And you have unlimited resources to go out and find that information. And it starts with your mindset to believe that you possibly can. Even when I got started under, I spent $10,000 when I first was trying to figure out how to be financially independent on basically snake oil, on this guy who was trading me how to do quant trading, how to do algorithmic trading, all this stuff. I spent ungodly amounts of money and time trying to figure all that stuff out. And the return on investment for that was abysmal. So what I'm trying to share now is, and that all sucked to have to go through. So I want you to not have to go through all that stuff. That's the reason that we have this podcast for free to the masses. But at least I started somewhere. And once I learned through trial and error and a lot of money that, like, oh, all of these things I tried didn't work. Okay. But I had the mindset that said, okay, but maybe the next thing will. Sometimes you have to fail 1,000 times before you succeed 1,001 time. I mean, imagine if I gave you a punch card, Dominic, had 20 punches on it, and it said fail, 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 fail. And you knew that after 20 punches of failure, you get the 21st would be free, and you'd be like, you get success. Well, you'd be super excited to be running around trying to find as many failures as you possibly can. Now, I don't know if it's 20 punches, if it's 100 punches, if it's 1,000 punches to get to that success. But I do believe that if you fail enough and you fail forward every time, eventually you will get there. And it might not be the there that you wanted it to be, but it will be somewhere that is going to be better than is today.
I think you're spot on with that. I think you're absolutely spot on with that. You know, I don't know if it's a men thing, or I think it's a male thing, because I never hear women, at least in the context that I'm thinking of, trying to get rich quick. Right? It's always a male thing for some reason. I don't know, because we've all been there. We've all been there. We've all invested in, maybe not all of us, but we've all had a version of this, right? Where it's like, oh man, I'm a smart guy. Like I could beat the system. You know, it's like, let me put X amount of dollars in this meme coin, or let me buy this stock, or let me purchase this. You know, it's like, I've done it all, guys. I've done it all. I've done literally all of it. And I don't remember who said it. I think it was Warren Buffett. And the quote goes something like, why don't people follow your trading advice? He's like, because nobody wants to get rich slow. And there's so many ways to lose your money fast, and there's so many ways to get rich slow, but nobody wants to do it. It's not complex.
No.
It's really not complex. I imagine what it takes to build a rocket, right? Very, very, very complex. Saving for retirement, investing in a good index, having a good financial advisor, not that complex, not terribly complex,
Yeah. And you don't even need a financial advisor. You just need to have the mindset to say, hey, however much I'm making, I'm going to continue to make that. I'm going to spend less than that. As I do that, I'm going to try to increase how much I'm making. I'm going to try to decrease how much I'm spending. And then I'm going to throw the rest of it at investments. And we have gone into very deep depth conversations as to what those investments are. And, regardless of what you're doing, majority of the time they're going to work out. I mean, as long as you're not like thinking that you're a genius, you're trying to outperform, but just test things and see. I think what most people do though is they're like, well, if I don't have the perfect plan, then I can't really get started. I can't tell you the amount of people I have met who's like, hey, what stock should I invest in? And I'll ask them like, okay, well, how much money are we talking about? Because I can't just give you like a random, like
Yeah.
that's a crazy question to just ask somebody. What
Yeah.
stock should I buy? I have to know a lot more context. So the first thing I ask is like, okay, well, how much is your income? How much coming in? When do you need this money? How much money do we have? And then majority of the answers I get is, oh, I don't have any money right now. But if you told me what could double tomorrow and then double again, then I would go and get money and then allow that to happen. And at that point, I'm just like, go to the casino. At least at that point, you're having fun as you lose all of your money.
Yeah. No, that is a really funny question. I think that was one of the questions I asked you when I first met you, kind of as a joke. I was like, yeah, what can I invest in to double my money? It's just like, it's one of those jokes that you say, but it's like, I mean, if you had something, I'd look into it, but it's really it's a naive question. It's a beginner question. It's an inexperienced question. And I feel like I've come so far from that guy who asked that question.
It's kind of sad. I don't talk too much about my coaching program very often, but I'll talk about it right now. So, I have a coaching program that usually goes about a year, and I work with business owners to make sure that they can get money out of the way so they can focus on their business. So I teach them basically what we teach on the pod. So rather than someone having to listen to, I don't know, 140 some odd episodes at this point, they can just get me and they have access to me as their financial advisor for a year, and they can ask whatever questions, whatever they need. I'm theirs. And recently I had a guy who booked an appointment with me. He came on and he's like, I'm just really curious what your system is, or not your system, but like, what's your strategy? What's your strategy? So I was hoping that he meant like, how do I do this? What's the strategy to becoming financially independent? What's the mindset that
mental
I need? What
strategy?
Do you have?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you have? Because I make a guarantee in my program that if you don't get the results, I will give you all your money back. And that doesn't mean that by the end of the year you're financially independent, but that means by the end of the year you have the mindset to become financially independent. And I have to go deeper into that as to what that means. But he came on, we did the meeting, and at the end of it, he was just like, I asked him like, what do you want? Because I tell these people, and I'm basically during the sales call, it's me trying to tell you why you don't want to do this, like why it's going to be hard, why it's going to be difficult, and why it's going to be the greatest thing you've ever done from a financial standpoint. Because rather than charging you a percentage of your money for the next 30, 40 years, I'm charging you a one-time flat fee, and then you get to have that information for the rest of your life to go forward and do with what you will. And at the end of the conversation, he goes, I'm just kind of disappointed. I really thought that you were going to have some investment strategy that I could just give you my money and you were just going to double it a few times so that I would be financially independent in a year. And I was like, okay. Have you ever heard of like a snake oil salesman? Or like, do you want me to lie to you? Because if you want me to lie to you, I'm not going to do that. But there are thousands of people out there who call themselves financial advisors, who call themselves gurus, who think they know everything, that say this system works definitively. There is nothing like that. From my experience, there is nothing that works all the time infinitely. And the reason for that is because if it worked all the time, then everyone would get on it and then it would go away.
Truthfully.
But the only thing that I do know that works in 99% of realities in the future, because there's so many things that can happen, is if you know what you're doing. If you make more money, if you're making more money, if you're spending less than you're making, and you're investing the difference, and you're trying to bring that up. If someone has a 50% savings rate, it doesn't matter what happens in the market, they will be fine. If you know how to live on 50% of your money, and I'm not saying that's easy, I'm not telling you a goal of 50%, but if someone can make $100,000 and learn to live off of $50,000, it doesn't matter what happens with their investments, it doesn't matter, because they're making so much more than they're spending every single month. They will be okay. And regardless if you think you can or you can't, you're right. Because the hardest thing that people have in life is they want to know, they want to be secure. They go to people like myself and say, am I going to be okay financially? And the only one that can answer that is the person asking the question. Because I don't know what the future holds. It's like if a few months ago we had those really bad fires in California. And there's a lot of people, and I lived in California, so I know quite a bit about it. I lived in that area, honestly, at one point. And people ask, like, are we going to be okay? We lost our house. Are we going to be okay? Do you think you're going to be okay? You tell me, are you going to be okay? Can you pick up? Can you move? Can you keep on trying? Because the only time you're going to fail is if you give up. If you stop moving forward, then no, you will not be okay. But if you keep moving forward, if you keep trying, you'll get there.
100%. And I think one of the things that I noticed in what you were just saying is rather than me telling you that you're going to be okay, you come to the conclusion yourself that you're going to be okay. I was reading this book on negotiating, and one of the things in there was he went to a suicide hotline, and he was this repeat caller. He's calling, and by the end of it, he's like, the guy's like, "You helped me so much. Thank you so much. You did amazing, and I feel so much better." And the guy gets off the line. He gets off the line. He goes to his boss because his boss was listening, and he's like, "That was great. I helped someone." He's like, "That was the worst call I've ever heard." And the reason it was the worst call was because you helped him. He's supposed to help himself, because anytime he needs help, he's going to come back now, rather than I'm in a bad slump. I can fix it myself. Right. So I love what you were saying right there, Chris. Like, are you going to be okay? Not you're going to be okay, but are you going to be okay? Because being okay is a decision. It's a choice. Some of the happiest people in the world are some of the poorest people in the world. And some of the saddest people in the world are the richest. Right. So happiness is a choice. Being okay is a choice. Being content is a choice. And I'm going to have to take some time to really think about this, but having enough is a choice as well. So I think with that being said, I appreciate the Savvy CPA for coming on our podcast. We're going to be moving on to our next phase, unless you have any other points you'd like to add. No? All righty, good. So we're going to be moving on to Five Friday Feedback. This is our viewer mailbag portion of the podcast where we like to listen from one of the letters from one of you guys, and we give our advice on it. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're sad. That's kind of why we have the win of the week right after it. So with that being said, Golden Handcuffs, why my union job feels like a prison. How about that? Howdy, Fi guys. I'm 31. On paper, my life is solid. I make $80,000 a year in a low cost of living area with 100% of my benefits and a decent pension. Yeah, I mean, that's a lottery ticket right there.
Yeah, dude. Okay, cool. That sounds good.
Right? So let's hear this prison aspect. So my income has allowed me to own a home. Beautiful. Keeping my bills manageable and enjoy a few luxuries here and there. But there's a catch. My job is soul-crushingly boring. I don't know if I can keep doing it. Okay. What are we talking
I've worked
here?
I've worked jobs that are really boring. So
Same.
I can get it. Let's go on.
All right. For almost 7 years, I've been bagging salt. That's it. My whole day boils down to this. I grab a 50-pound bag of salt. I place it under the machine. I let it fill with salt. It stacks on a pallet. Repeat. Repeat that process about 1,000 times a day, 4 days a week. And it's monotonous, backbreaking work. And even though the pay is good, I mean, yeah, 80K is pretty decent for a low cost of living area. I feel like my brain is rotting.
For bagging salt. He's making 80K for bagging salt. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to knock on his parade. I'm just saying like 80K for like holding a bag of salt. Okay, well, let's go on. I'm not trying to judge you.
I mean,
I'm not trying to judge you.
80K. That's 80K is over 6,000 a month.
Yeah,
sounds about right. So yeah, I do. I mean, let me continue. Let me continue before I make any final assessments. So there's no music, no headphones, no podcast, unfortunately.
That sucks. Okay,
that does suck. That does suck. You know. Something about safety regulations or something. You're just left alone with your own thoughts. The constant hum of machinery. Okay, so it could be a good thing and a bad thing. You know, being alone with your own thoughts.
It's really funny. I was going to say, like, if this was me in this situation, I have podcasts in constant. I'd be learning and be like, yeah, I'm getting a workout, holding 50 pounds a bag, and I'm learning information. But then he immediately says, like, but we can't listen to information. So he goes, like, so you're alone with your own thoughts. And the way my brain goes is like, wow, instead of saying like, I'm alone with my own thoughts, this sucks, it'd be like, what an amazing opportunity to explore the recesses of my own mind. Like, this could almost be meditative. Like you have the ability to meditate 8 to 10 hours a day. Because you can meditate literally anything. You can meditate while washing the dishes. I try to do it all the time. I'm not good at it. I have to usually sit down. But you have the ability for your job to try to get meditative every day and just be 100% present. So I'm curious as to what the issue is.
You know, like you always tell us, most of life's problems are because we can't sit in a dark room alone with our own thoughts. And this could be the situation that he's in. Being that it's a lousy, noisy room with tons of salt and backbreaking work, but I digress. The job demands are relentless. Most new hires don't even last a year. You get a week of training where the expectations seem manageable, bagging about 300 bags a day. Then a week or two hits and you're thrown into the deep end. 1,000 bags a day or you're out. You know, I want to pause real quick right there. I wonder how long he can keep doing it physically. Not so much mentally, but physically. Because that sounds, I mean, that's 1,000 bags a day. I mean, he said it was 50-pound bags. I mean, that's not light. And
Yeah.
I've seen some jacked old guys. Don't get me wrong. My dad's, he's very strong. He's got that farm strength, that construction guy strength, you know? So you can do it, but that's at a high tax on your body. So
Yeah. So I wonder if that's what it is. It's like he's telling himself a story like, this job is also taking my health, my like vitality, because it's forcing me to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And again, it's a choice for you to see it that way. Because I just realized that from reading this again, it's not just $80,000 a year, 100% benefits and a pension. Like pension for bagging salt sounds crazy. Like the only people that are getting pensions right now are like military.
yeah, and cops, some cops,
And fire.
yeah,
Like government jobs are getting pensions.
government, yeah. Not really. Maybe
Not
some class
salt bagging
executives, maybe,
companies.
but even then, it's like, so there's no room for error. If you fall for it even once, you get a warning. 3 strikes and you're fired. I've seen it happen countless times. People burning out, injury, or simply unable to keep up with the brutal pace. I've been here long enough to be the veteran on the floor. The guy closest to me in seniority has only been here a year. The other 3 workers, less than 6 months on their belt. And they're already complaining about how miserable the job feels. So wait, I wonder, I'm just going to pause real quick. I've found, at least in my experience working in different places, if your coworkers are jolly, if they have the same mindset, if they're fun to work with, time flies, right?
Yep.
Or if you have someone, it's like, dude, this guy sucks, you know? It's like, you know what I'm saying? So I wonder if, like, would he be complaining if he had, like, his friends there working with him? Like, these guys are like amigos. It's like, oh, let's talk about the game. It's like, let's do this. But it sounds like, I mean, with the noise, with the work, there's like no time for, you know, office banter or anything like that. So
I also wonder, and this is just me like pontificating on something that I don't know, because who knows, is, you know, when you like come into a place and you get your training and like they come and they like meet you to the veteran guy and they're like, hey, this is Chuck. He's been here for 6 years. Chuck's going to teach you all this stuff. And then you go to Chuck and you're like, all right, Chuck, I'm ready to learn. I'm happy, bright eyes. And Chuck goes, get ready for the worst hell of your life. Like, this is all going to be awful. And then from there, like, you're just like, oh no. Like, and then he brought you down. Now imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but imagine if our writer is that person in the office. He's been there the longest, and everyone that comes in filters through him, filters through his negativity. Everyone looks to him for guidance of how do you do it. And he's just super negative all the time. And then that feeds down to them being negative. And now we have a positive feedback loop of negativity. Everyone just bitching and complaining and bitching and complaining. And now in your brain, you've made it out to be this $80,000 a year job where you're bagging salt, which sounds physically very taxing, has now become like the worst thing because you've told yourself a story that you're doing the worst thing in the world. I was just thinking, like, if you had this job, right? So to our listener, and tomorrow your boss comes and goes, hey, we have a new machine that's going to do all this for you guys. So yeah, bye. How would you feel then?
that's a very interesting way to look at it. To be grateful, to look at it through the gratitude lenses. Yeah, I mean, what would you do if your job was axed tomorrow? You know, I know a lot of us don't like our jobs, but that job puts food on our table. You know, it clothes our loved ones. It gives us the ability to, I mean, survive. I think too often we look at things only in the negative light without really giving it a fair shake.
Yeah, and I
So
can
continuing-
speak from Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
go
speak
for it.
from personal experience of like, you get a job and you're like, oh my gosh, you're calling people like, I got a job. It's so great.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then a few months later, you're like, I hate this place. It's the worst place in the world. You're talking crap with your coworkers about it, all this stuff. And I've been in finance for a while. And in finance, it's a very quick, like if you mess up once or anything, like we axe you. Budget cuts, like, well, they just cut people. There's been places I've worked where it's like, you can't even talk about that guy being gone. Like it's
Really?
not okay to even ask the question, what happened to that person? Like it's just one day you walk in, everything's gone, and then you're just supposed to look forward and pretend like they never existed. You can't even talk about them around the water cooler as if what happened to them. I've had places where it's like you need to unfriend them on Facebook, you need to unfriend them on LinkedIn. Like you can't, like,
What?
yeah, if they don't work here anymore, they are dead to us. I've been in those types of places, and I've also been fired from those types of places for no fault of my own, just because of whatever the wind went left or right that day. So if that's the situation, and it doesn't sound like it because it's a union job and you have these three strike policies, I get it. Three strike sucks. All this stuff sucks. And you're choosing to look at it in the worst situation because I don't know. I guess let's go on before I make a judgment because he could say something at the end that's going to like turn this whole situation around and me be like, bro, I get it. You got to go. But let's see.
Absolutely. So we're about halfway through. So my body aches constantly. My knees, my back, they're not built to endure this kind of punishment forever. And yet I keep showing up because the alternatives seem worse. Here's the rub. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I mean, quite literally, honestly. If I leave, the most I can hope for is another labor job that pays $50K at best, he says, without the union protection, benefits, or pension. And going back to school, that's a hard no for me. Friends who spent years earning degrees are now stuck in retail or service jobs, struggling to pay off their student loans. Why trade one dead-end grind for another, except with more debt, right? I've tried to move up the ladder, but management is dead-end too. They want someone with a degree and over a decade of supervisory experience. I have neither, so I'm stuck in this rut with no clear way forward. I'm asking myself, do I keep doing this until my body gives out? Do I take a pay cut and find something less grueling, but far less lucrative? What's the point of having a stable income if the work is eating away my soul? From bagging salt may pay the toll, but it's breaking down my body and soul. Okay. Bagging salt may pay the toll, but it's breaking down my body and soul. Okay. Sorry, I had to hit him with a little jingle there because that was pretty depressing. Yeah, that's
I was hoping at the end he would like really pull it out for like
yeah.
why he is like in such a bad situation. I've been trying really hard to be less judgmental, to just let things be the way they are, not to judge. And especially on Five Friday feedback, I don't want to come across as an asshole. Today, I need to come across as an asshole. What do you think about this one before I get into it, before I start ranting?
I think greener pastures aren't always green. And I don't know. I don't know what your budget looks like. Maybe you're just living that Spartan life, man. You got, you said it's a low cost of living area. Maybe your house payment's like $1,200. Maybe you're spending like $2,000 a month all in. And like, that's like, you're good. You're happy and you're pocketing the other 4,000 and change. So maybe it's like, I mean, it's not that much money to you. Then again, the benefits, the pension, the protection. I mean, there's a lot to consider more than money. Yeah, I would say, man, yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I hope you're saving a lot of your money. I really hope you're saving a lot of your money. Because there's nothing worse than suffering for your money and having nothing left to show for it. That is a terrible feeling. So I hope you're maybe investing that extra money in something that you're passionate about, maybe something that can kind of offset the cost it would cost you to move to another job, maybe like an investment property or something like that.
How many of us though, I can speak from personal experience, have worked a job that they absolutely hate just to make money, and when they finally make that money because they hate their job so much, they go and they buy something to make them feel momentarily happy because of the job that they hate. And now the thing that they bought just took all the money that the job that they hate gave them, so they didn't even buy anything that could make them money in the future. No, they couldn't buy an asset. They went and bought something, a trip or something, just to get away from the job that they hate. And then due to this oddity of life, the thing you bought now hamstrings you to the job that you hate to be able to pay for the thing you bought. And you do this cycle every single weekend, right? You know, I remember there's this, I think it was an old, I can't remember who the comedian is, but there's this old bit where it's like, you know, you go through work Monday through Friday, and you work so hard. And then on Friday, you're like, yeah, I'm going to go hard. So you drink heavily on Friday, heavily on Saturday, heavily on Sunday. So that when you get back to Monday, you're like, oh, thank God I'm back at work. So you're just kind of going through these like awful cycles that you're putting yourself into. You hate work, so you need a drink to get away from work. And then you need to go back to work to pay off your drinking debts and to get yourself away from your drinking.
Yeah.
Now, instead of drinking, supplement whatever your vice is that you're spending on.
Yeah, 100%. For me, at least, if I was him in this situation, I would suck it up, but not forever. I think to work without a plan is pointless. You know, you got to have some form of hope at the end of the road. What I would be doing if it was me, since it's a low cost of living area, I would look into possibly buying real estate. This is me talking. I'm not going to give you advice, but this is what I would do if I was you. Because if you started buying up rental properties and, you know, principal pay down of renters and maybe throwing any extra cash you have towards that, if you wanted to move to a different job, if you wanted to, you would then have another separate income that would be like a little pension in its own, right? Is there going to be troubles down the line? You know, AC goes out, roof needs fixed. You know, of course. Yeah, of course. But that's kind of where my mind goes. My mind's always gone to real estate. But I always think like if you have extra money, it's either, you got to do something with that energy, because the energy can't just sit still. You got to move it. You got to use it. You got to expand it, or you got to decrease it. Energy being money, obviously. But yeah, that's kind of where my take is. Get something for your suffering. And maybe not exit, like leave next week. Like after this, you listen to the pod, you're like, next week I'm gone. It's like, no. How about 5 more years? How about just 60 months, right? Let's just do that. And then with all the extra money, let's tighten our belts, let's save, let's invest, and let's like figure out a way out. Like that would be my kind of thought process. But what do you think, Chris?
That'd be my process too. I would love to see. So he knows he makes $80K a year. He knows he has benefits. He knows he has a pension. Like I would love to know what those benefits are and what does that pension mean? Like what is that defined benefit? At what point does it start? How long do you have to be there? I don't have enough information. But what I do know is that he's making $80,000 a year, and he says he still has some money for luxuries here and there. And he lives in a a low cost of living area, and he's able to own a house. This guy's got a lot of blessings that he has. Yes, his job sounds monotonous. And the only thing that I'm thinking about here is I don't know how his body feels. Like I don't know that. If your motion is just to like turn your hips all day with like weight or something like that, yeah, you're going to mess up your body. So instead of doing the same pattern one direction every time, can you change up the pattern and do it a different direction? Like, can you do stuff like that? Because can you leave the job? 100% you can leave the job and go find a different job. But to your own volition, the job will be $30,000 left and no less, and not have any of the benefits. We always say that the grass is greener on the other side, and that might be true. But the reason the grass is not green on your side is because you're not watering it. When you get to that other side, just because it's green because somebody else has been watering it, and now you take over that property and you don't water the grass, it will eventually become just like the opposite side. So I'm trying to think about that like analogy of the grass is always on the other side. Well, yeah, because you're not there messing it up. But the moment you get over there and you start messing it up, the next job is going to feel even worse because you're saying like, yeah, the other job I'm going to get is going to be $30,000 less, but it's also going to be a hardworking job, a labor job, because it sounds like labor is the thing that you believe you can only do.
Yeah.
And now I can imagine you get that other labor job, and yeah, maybe you're not doing the exact same motion every day, but you're going to find a new motion that you're going to be doing every day for $30,000 less, no pension, no benefits. Is that reasonable for you? Earlier on in the podcast, Dominic, you asked me how much of being financially independent is your mindset versus the actual specifics of the numbers. And I told you it's somewhere like 80 or 90%. is the mindset of, will I be okay? Can I get there? If you believe you can, you can. If you believe it's not even possible, you're not even going to try. So of course you're not. There's a part in this letter where he says that going back to work isn't for him. Trying to get a benefit or trying to work up in the company is not for him. He basically has told himself that he can't do anything more. He can't find any other job that isn't labor. He refuses to go back to school, and he refuses to try to climb the ladder to management. If you think that nothing else is available to you but this, then you are right. Because whenever you go, if someone was to even offer you a management role, which no one just goes around offering people roles, like, you have to seek out that stuff. You just have to. So this all sounds like a mindset issue to me, that you are looking at your situation, and before you had this job, or just imagine today that you lost your job. Your boss came to you and said, hey, we have this automatic salt bagging machine. Doesn't seem that hard for me to think that a machine can do this. And you're out. Like, bye, bro. Have a good rest of your day. How would you feel in that situation? Because our brain has this, it's called the hedonic treadmill, this ability to habituate immediately to our circumstances. I bet when you got this job, you were so excited. Yes, $80,000, whatever it is, a few weeks of training, and then it's going to be an easy job, blah, blah, blah. And then now that you have it, you no longer value it. But if you lost it, you would value it again. The same way we don't value our spouses, we don't value our kids, we don't value these things because we assume that it's constant and forever. But the nature of reality, the nature of life is that things are always changing. And until it changes and goes away, we don't realize the importance of what we had. So I can't answer to you if it's worth leaving the job or not leaving the job. That's a personal decision you can make. But if you believe that there is no other opportunities for you out there, you need to look yourself in the mirror and figure it out for yourself, that there is. Because if you believe that there's nothing out there, you're not going to search for it. Your job sounds, subjectively to me, does not sound fun. And I think if I was in a situation where I didn't have money and I had a family or I had a mortgage payment, I would be doing that job all day. Maybe not forever, but I would be doing it while I set up the plan, and I would use that job as the springboard to get me where I want. Because another thing I just saw as I was talking about that is you're only working 4 days a week.
Yeah. 3-day weekend, baby.
That gives you so much time to educate yourself, to figure out a plan, to start a side hustle, to do other things. Maybe you're saying like, oh man, I'm working so hard physically. Your brain's not working. Can you start to think of business ideas? And then when you go to work, you're thinking of those business ideas, doing stuff like that. Like, yeah, it really sucks. You can't listen to podcasts. You can't get information. Like, that would be its own kind of form of hell. And you can look at it as a meditative experience, just to look at it. Do you know the difference, Dominic, between solitude and isolation? Choice. When you are in solitude, you want to be alone. You choose that. The worst form of hell we can put people through is isolation, where we force you away from other people. We put you in a room by yourself. They're both the exact same experience. You're alone in a room by yourself. You are alone. No one's there to distract you. The only difference is that in one, you choose it, and in the other, it is imposed upon you. There are people that get locked up in our prison systems, and American prison systems are awful, and we could talk about that for days and days. We're not going to, though. Where the worst form of punishment we have for those people is to put them in isolation for days or weeks.
Confinement, yeah.
Even for like years. And we know from the literature that people that do solitary for years, they come out crazy. Like, they're just gone. They most of the time cannot come back. However, in Tibet, in Zen Buddhism, in order to become like a full-fledged monk, you need to do a minimum of a year-long retreat alone in a cave, alone by yourself. And those people are some of the most enlightened beings that I've ever heard when I hear them speak. And again, for me, it comes down to choice. In one, you're being forced to sit by yourself for a year in lockup. In the other, you're being forced, or you're choosing to sit by yourself for a year in lockup in order to experience all that is. In order to be with yourself, not to think about the past, not to think about the future, but to be 100% present in the moment, experiencing the nature of reality. There are, I think, like 10,000 genomes that we have. Each one of them has 4 different levels. The possibilities are endless for how many people can be born. I think there's like 10 million people on the planet or something like that. And there are infinite numbers of computations of people. The likelihood of you being here right now, existing, is minuscule at best. Yet we all take for granted that we have this life, that we're here because we're existing. But there are infinite number of other souls, other beings, other whatever that will never exist and can never exist ever again. So it's all depending on how you want to look at it. Yes, things can all suck and things are great simultaneously. And it depends on which way you want to look. And it sounds like you're choosing to look at the crappy side every single day. And from a guy that experiences that every single day, because I look negatively constantly, I'm constantly having to fight it, I get it. And it's on you to fix it, just like it's on me to get better.
Something you said on solitude versus isolation. We opened the podcast with the question, how important is mindset in personal finance? And if you expand the question just a little bit more, how important is mindset in the game of life, not the board game, the actual game of life? I wonder, you were saying that people who come out of, the prison system when they go into isolation like that, I think would be a beautiful test to someone's mind and someone's belief system if, hey, they got sent to prison, they got sent to isolation. Rather than saying, like, telling themselves, like, I got sent to isolation, it's like, no, I chose to be here. I chose solitude. I chose to be here by myself. I chose. Do you think that that paradigm shift of extreme accountability, and not necessarily accountability, but that concept of control, that, no, it's like, hey, I got sent to prison. It's like, no, I didn't get sent to prison. I chose to be in prison for what I've done. I've never heard that framework kind of worked out. Obviously, no one wants to go to prison, but if you could convince yourself that if you're going to go anyways because of a crime or something, it can help. And I have an antidote for that. A couple days ago, I was going on a run, and I'm training for a big race, and you step into the garage right before you open the garage door, the actual gate. You're going to it's warm in there, right? And you open the door and you're like, damn, it's freaking cold. And what I did was I told myself, it's like, this is going to suck, and that's okay. But I'm choosing this pain. I'm choosing to go forward. No one's forcing me. No one's watching me. No one expects it of me. But I'm choosing to do it. And I opened that door and it was cold. It was real cold. But it wasn't that cold. But I know if I had a mindset of like, I open this door and like, man, it's chill. I just want to go inside. Like, it's so, I might get hypothermia. It's so cold. Like, and really it's like 50 degrees. It's like not that crazy, right? The mind is so much more powerful than we give it credit. And a lot of what Chris and I talk about on this podcast is purely just training the mind. Personal finance is personal, but you have to know yourself before you can be successful at being yourself. So I hope you're choosing the right mindset this week. I hope you're looking at things through the best vision that you can. It's so difficult sometimes. I remember a time when I didn't have this mindset, right? Where I only saw things through a certain way. But for this week's action step and what Chris was talking, I wanted to say that I hope you value what you have and don't take it for granted. Like our friend here, he has something great, but it is challenging. But make sure not to take your family, your work, your health for granted. And I know Chris had one more point he wanted to add on that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that concept of choice to suffer. And I think that concept of choice really means everything, because there's so much in life that we have zero control over. The only thing we have control over is the way we respond to it. I do a cold plunge every freaking day, and I hate it every freaking day. And I think if someone was to grab me and force me into that water for 4.5 minutes, I would revolt with everything that I had in my body. Like, it would be excruciating. But the fact that I choose to stand there and I choose to get inside that water and I can choose to get out before the timer goes off, I have the choice. Is it bad? Yeah, it sucks, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I can't remember. I might say the name. I might have the wrong general, but hopefully I'm right. I think it was General Stockdale. During the Vietnam War, he was a pilot, and he got ejected from his plane, and he was going down towards the canopy where the Viet Cong were. And if it is Stockdale, Stockdale was a big Stoic. He read Stoicism. He was very big into Stoicism. And according to his memoir, as he was going down, he said, I leave the world of man and I enter the world of Epictetus. Epictetus was one of the first Stoic philosophers. He was born a slave. His leg was mangled by his master. And he understood. This is a man who understood. Epictetus is a man that understood what suffering was, understood the way of the world, that it was not what he wanted. But the only thing that he had was control of his mind, how he responded. So when Stockdale got down there, he got imprisoned. His bones were broken. He had all of these things happen to him. And from his memoir and from reading some of the letters that some of the other men wrote about him having him there, was one of the strongest people there, that he was able to tell rally his men around him in one of the worst situations that a human being can find themselves in, because he defined his suffering, that one day when he got out of this suffering is going to mean something. I'm going through this not for myself, but for my men. Viktor Frankl went through the Holocaust, lost his family, lost his wife, lost everything. And he was able to redefine his meaning as, when I get out of this, he would sit there and give lectures as if he was sitting in his lecture hall talking to a group of graduate students about the nature of the mind. And of course, that wasn't happening. It was all happening in his mind. But after he got out of Auschwitz, he had the opportunity to go and give those talks that he was thinking, these are what's getting me through, are these moments, these little things. The common thing that we all have as human beings is consciousness. And in truth, I only know that I have consciousness. I don't know if Dominic does, but Dominic has consciousness because he tells me that, and I have to believe him. And he doesn't know if I have consciousness. He has just to believe me. But the common thing that all sentient beings have is suffering. If you're in pain, if I'm in pain, we all have that. So the only real thing that we all are aware of is suffering, because it doesn't matter what sentient being you have, a dog, whatever, you can say that dog isn't conscious, but that dog can suffer. That ant can suffer. That's the only thing that we all have in common, is the grounding experience of life, is this suffering. And the way that you choose to define that suffering is the way that you choose to define your life. Because all of life is suffering. It is not that all of life is pain. It's that all of life is hard. It's arduous. It doesn't go the way that you want it to. There are always going to be things, and every single being experiences that. And if you believe that I'm the only unique person and the universe is conspiring uniquely against me, this is a really hard way to go through it. Because in reality, the universe doesn't even care about you. You're just another cog in a wider whole.
And thank God for suffering. Honestly, thank God for suffering. Can you imagine a life where everything was easy? There would be no reason to push yourself, and we would then cease to exist over time. Nothing to push us, nothing. The hunger, that everything came easy. Bam, 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 bam. And we're getting to a life like that. So,
and as we do, our levels of depression, anxiety, all these things are raising, and it's only rising in the first world countries.
Yeah.
So, is it causational? Is it correlational? I don't know, but it's definitely something to be talked about.
Absolutely. For another episode.
Well,
I hope that helps you, friend. Now we'll be moving on to our win of the week. Chris, what do you have for your win of the week?
So during Christmas time, we were going on flights to Oklahoma, and our flight got super delayed when we were leaving from San Diego. And then we ended up missing our connecting flight. We actually landed as the other plane was taking off. So we tried to get off the plane and run through the airport to make it.
Yeah.
As we were sprinting, we got the notification that it had just left. We're like, no. So we had to stay inside the airport for another 8 hours to get on the next plane, blah, 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 blah.
Gotcha.
Well, I didn't know this, but they had credited us $100 for that happening. And it must have gone to spam or junk or whatever. So one day I was kind of clearing out my folder and I was like, oh, hey, they credited us $100. So did I say 1,000 or 100? I meant 100. So I was able to use that $100 credit to buy another plane ticket for another trip we're going on. So beautiful. Thank you, Southwest, for sticking to what you guys do when you mess up.
Big shout out to Southwest. For my win of the week, it's been a month and some change now, going strong on a full set of New Year's resolutions and new habits and new routines. A lot of things that I've been wanting to get better on. I think the easiest path to success is mastering the easy stuff first, right? And I heard this quote from someone I admire recently, and it was saying basically that you guys can't even do the lazy things correctly. Going to bed on time, waking up on time, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, stuff like that. And for me, that was one of my problems, right? Going to bed on time, waking up on time, right? Brushing my teeth twice a day, right? Flossing. I know some of you listening, terrible flossers, myself included. And over the course of this year so far, I've been able to rework who I am rather than, I don't floss. I know I should. It's like, no, I floss. Why? Because that's what I do. Because I'm a healthy individual and I choose to be healthy. And that's part of it, right? Same with other things like taking my creatine, right? Taking my vitamins, right? Habit stacking it has been very useful for me. Very, very useful. So I highly recommend habit stacking. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. Very useful. But yes, that is my win of the week. Is I've been really proud of myself on how consistent I've been with my habits, and they're slowly transitioning outside of being habits and starting to be more of just what I do. So in a few more weeks, I'll remove them from my habit tracker because they are who I am now. So I'm excited for that transition, and that is my win of the week.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe. Most importantly, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. And please share the podcast with one friend or family member, someone that you want to succeed and bring along on this journey of financial independence, because there are going to be trips, there's going to be falls. It is a long journey, and having someone to go with will get you there. We're often going alone. You'll give up before you can. So with that, I'm Chris. He's Dom. Later.
Peace.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.